Rain hammered the canopy like a vendetta. Every leaf quivered with cold purpose, and somewhere off to the east, something screamed a guttural, deep-throated howl, followed by the sound of foliage being shredded. It was a welcome committee, just not the kind Marcus had in mind. He hit the mud hard, knees sinking in deep enough to make standing a two-stage effort. His pod hissed closed behind him and lifted back into the sky, leaving him alone with a basic survival kit, his soaked uniform, and 30 days to not die. "All right," he muttered, squinting up at the heavy green sky. "Let's get started." The moon classified only as G431. M was humid and aggressive, an uncolonized biome full of territorial wildlife, carnivorous plants, and a weather system that seemed designed by committee. Most cadets lasted less than 3 days without signaling for help. The ones that stayed were left to endure, monitored remotely by a rotating crew of instructors who occasionally bet rations on outcomes. Marcus wiped his hands on his pants and pulled out his kit. 1 collapsible knife, a basic med pack, 3 nutrient bars, water tablets, no map, no comms, no tent. The rest was up to ingenuity and anatomy. Day 1 was about reconnaissance. Marcus moved slow and quiet, ignoring his blisters and resisting the urge to bushwhack through the underbrush like a tourist. He marked trees with mud for a breadcrumb trail, and eventually found high ground, an outcrop near a stream that didn't smell sulfurous or shimmer with microbial death. There was a breeze, fewer insects, and signs that a large predator had recently used a fallen log as a scratching post. He'd remember that detail later. By nightfall, he had a small tarp lean-to, a stone ring fire pit, and 1 empty stomach. He didn't sleep much. On day 2, he began to build. Across the moon, cadets were struggling. The Cherval named Reshta was already limping from a shallow laceration to her lower limb, after being startled by a spiny crawler. Her survival pack had fallen down a ravine, and she'd spent the first night drinking from leaf runoff and sobbing. A Norix named Skav had accidentally eaten a bioluminescent fruit that induced violent hallucinations. Another cadet broke his ankle within 6 hours of landing. Meanwhile, the human Marcus was harvesting bamboo. It wasn't true bamboo, not technically. The stalks were fibrous, segmented, and grew in clusters along the stream banks. They bent before they broke and were hollow in the center, making them perfect for construction, water transport, and spears. By the end of day 3, Marcus had built a proper shelter, not a lean-to, a structure. 4 walls lashed with woven vine, a sloped roof layered with broad leaves, and an elevated floor of interlocked planks that creaked but didn't break. The monitoring station flagged his GPS for a closer look. The instructors leaned forward. Most cadets were still trying to light a fire with wet sticks. "This one's clearing land?" Examiner Kolith murmured, eyes narrowing. "Is he expanding?" "Probably just nesting behavior," shrugged Joe Tev, a Luvian with 7 years of survival training. "They get territorial under stress." Kolith grunted. "Humans don't nest, they fortify." By day 5, Marcus had fire, filtered water, and traps. He dug a channel to divert part of the stream toward a makeshift sediment filter, gravel, charcoal, and cloth from his emergency undershirt. Water collected in bamboo tubes, boiled on flat stones near the fire. He'd fashioned a set of tripwire noisemakers around the perimeter and started baiting small fauna with local fruit. And yes, he got sick. Day 6. He vomited for hours. He'd misidentified a root that resembled a terrestrial yam, but had an alkaloid concentration high enough to irritate the gut. His hands shook from dehydration. He lay curled in the corner of his shelter, teeth chattering. That was when a reptilian cadet named Strahl, from the Voran species, stumbled upon the camp. He had a dislocated shoulder and a swollen eye. Both eyes widened as he took in the sight of the shelter, the fire, and the human curled up, looking very not victorious. "You are unwell," Strahl said in his native, clicking dialect. Then, in broken standard, "You built this while dying?" Marcus sat up with effort. "I wasn't dying when I built it." Strahl hesitated, then dropped his pack. "I broke tree, fell down. I require joint reversal." Marcus blinked. "You dislocated your shoulder?" "I did not locate it, Yes. Through blurred vision and a still upset stomach, Marcus washed his hands, boiled water, cleaned a bamboo rod, and helped Strahl sit still long enough to attempt a reduction. It took 2 tries. The pop echoed through the shelter, followed by a sound from Strahl that Marcus later described as a yelp from a dinosaur swallowing a squeaky toy. Afterward, they sat by the fire. Strahl offered a pouch of edible pods he'd been hoarding. Marcus shared the last half of a nutrient bar. "This place," Strahl said slowly. "It is acceptable." Marcus leaned back against the wall. "I'm calling it Camp Chillax." Strahl's translator garbled the word. "Camp Chilled Axe?" "Close enough." Day 10, the second visitor arrived. Her name was Alashi, a felinoid from the Kelmari Compact, and she was limping from an untreated laceration on her thigh. The moment she saw the camp, she froze. "What is this?" "Camp Chillax," Marcus said, gesturing like a greeter at a resort. "We have filtered water, cooked grubs, hammocks, and first aid. Please deposit your entry fee in the log." "I do not understand." "Help me reinforce the perimeter and I'll give you dinner. Fair trade." She hesitated, glanced at the cooking fire, the scent of actual warm food curling through the air, and nodded. Marcus cleaned her wound with boiled water and covered it with a sterile bandage from his kit. He showed her how to weave a support frame for a second shelter and installed another hammock. Strahl had remained nearby, silent and wide-eyed, observing everything like he was watching a magician pull doves from a hat. That night, 3 other cadets approached, drawn by the firelight and smell. Marcus served them mashed roots, properly boiled this time, and fried insect patties. By day 15, Marcus had signage. A bamboo slab etched with Camp Chillax. Clean water, 1 favor. Cooked meal, 2 favors or trade. First aid, 3 favors or gift. Jungle tour, 5 favors, includes souvenir rock. Massage rock therapy, donation only. We take credits, spores, or teeth. He used teeth as a trade currency because they were oddly common among the local wildlife, mostly molars. No one asked questions. Alashi took over cooking 2 days later. Strahl organized hammock rotations. A 4th cadet, Tolik, helped design a rain catcher and constructed a latrine that would later be described by one examiner as surprisingly elegant. Camp Chillax became a hub, a place of warmth, safety, and bizarre economy. Marcus tracked debts in a small notebook with columns for species, transaction, and currency. He even started offering guided meditation under a rock overhang, with the soothing sound of distant screeches. The local predators? They avoided the camp. Possibly due to the scent perimeter Marcus had crafted by carefully collecting scent gland secretions from a massive tree beast that slept 10 hours a day and stank like burning onions. "How'd you even get close to it?" Elashi once asked. "I didn't. I waited until it passed out, then used gloves and a spoon. Horrifying, but effective." Strahl only nodded. "You are terrifying." From orbit, the instructors were in uproar. "He's charging for meals." He splinted an arm with bamboo and a shoelace. It worked. He's recording economic data during a survival exam. Half the wildlife's rerouting around the camp. It's become a sanctuary. He built a spa. Marcus, crouched near the fire, adjusted a solar still made from plastic wrap and leaf pans. The afternoon heat had returned, and he was shirtless, sunburned, and currently arguing with a cadet over interest rates on a bag of roasted beetles. The exam was far from over. But for now, Camp Chillax thrived. And the jungle, for reasons no one could explain, seemed to respect that. The morning of day 16 began with a dispute over hammocks. Tolik had drawn up a reservation chart during the night, complete with species-specific comfort rankings and sleep cycle schedules. Unfortunately, it didn't account for Grint, a shelled quadruped cadet who'd taken one look at the webbing and decided it was a ceremonial offering. He'd climbed in, released a cloud of territorial musk, and promptly fallen asleep. Marcus resolved the issue by erecting a new hammock quadrant dubbed Musk Alley, spraying it down with boiled citrus sap, and promising Grint his own corner, retreat pod, in exchange for 2 baskets of beetle jerky and a dozen polished fruit stones. He got the stones by that afternoon. Grint never asked what they were for. That same day, the first jungle tour sold out. 4 cadets, 3 bipedal, 1 vaguely spherical, followed Marcus down a cleared trail marked with twisted vines and flat stones, each etched with crude symbols he claimed were from an ancient Earth language called advertising. Here you'll see the legendary spine fruit grove, Marcus announced, sweeping a hand toward a stand of glossy-leaved trees. Do not eat the fruit. I did once, that was a bad day. The cadets leaned in cautiously. Here we have a predator den. Note the scratch marks. Notice the lack of carcasses nearby. That's because these animals hunt further out. Smarter, not harder. He wasn't wrong. The area surrounding Camp Chillax had become strangely peaceful. Monitors watching from orbit confirmed a clear drop in predator movement near the perimeter. The prevailing theory was the scent gland perimeter, though the instructors debated if the bizarre local ecology was responding to something less obvious, like music. Because yes, Camp Chillax had music. Marcus had fashioned a crude xylophone out of dried bamboo and hollowed gourds, taught Alashi to beat a slow rhythm, and occasionally performed what he called sunset solos, with accompaniment from Strahl's chittering backup clicks. Examiner Kolith muttered, "This isn't a survival scenario, it's a festival." Jotev adjusted his monitor. He's still within exam parameters. He hasn't broken a rule. He's monetizing morale. I don't even know what that means. Later that evening, a cadet named Erval arrived, dragging a makeshift sled. His face was pale, and his left arm hung limp. Marcus saw the blood-stained wrap and dropped the roasted root he'd been turning. What happened? Fall, Erval gasped. Cliff, arm, I think it's broken. Marcus didn't answer right away. He glanced at the others gathered near the fire. Strahl stiffened, Alashi already gathering boiled water. Talik started clearing a flat spot beside the fire. Set him down. Gently. Erval groaned as he lay back, cradling his limb. Marcus removed the wrapping and inspected the swelling. The forearm was misshapen. There was a deep abrasion running down one side, and the skin was mottled. Not an open fracture, thank God, Marcus muttered. But it's bad. He spent the next 20 minutes boiling more water, cutting bamboo splints, and tearing the cleanest remaining sections of his spare shirt. The arm had to be immobilized before the swelling worsened. Marcus set it in place as carefully as he could, stabilizing the wrist and elbow. Erval bit down on a stick. The snap of repositioning made 3 cadets look away. Afterward, Marcus cleaned the wound with boiled water and a makeshift salve made from antiseptic leaves he'd tested on himself the previous week. Alashi whispered something about a wound spirit escaping. Strahl just passed him a fresh strip of cloth. Marcus looked drained. His hands shook slightly. You're gonna need to keep that elevated. No climbing, no lifting. Keep drinking water. How long? Erval rasped. 6 weeks minimum for full healing, Marcus replied. You've got 2 weeks left on this moon. You'll manage. Erval nodded, blinking hard. Thank you. Thank the spa, Marcus muttered. We're running a limited time promotion. By day 18, Exam Command officially intervened. Marcus was notified via a drone that hovered over camp and broadcast a stern message in 5 languages. It floated down a printed warning with the Interstellar Cadet Corps logo at the top. Notice: the Wilderness Final Exam is not intended for economic exchange. Camp Chillax must cease all unsanctioned commerce immediately. Marcus read it aloud, then tucked it into a bamboo frame next to the pricing board and labeled it Exhibit A, Unwarranted Critique. I'm not running a business, he said to no one in particular. I'm surviving. Food, shelter, morale. This is all part of it. Strahl offered to build a second fire pit in solidarity. Alashi began crafting a Camp Chillax emblem from woven reeds. Talik started taking reservations for guided night hikes, which came with glowing mineral bracelets and insect-repellent smudges. Marcus didn't stop the commerce, he refined it. Day 22 saw the arrival of an exhausted, limping Darishi cadet who refused to offer any form of currency, trade, or favor. I am an honorable warrior, he announced. To ask for help is dishonor. To pay for it is surrender. Marcus handed him a bowl of hot stew anyway. I'll bill you later. No, the Darishi said stiffly. I will accept this without transaction. Then you're a guest, Marcus replied. Guests help with dishes. The Darishi paused. That is acceptable. Later, he was seen cheerfully stoking the fire, teaching Strahl a war song involving 7 clicks and a high-pitched wail. From the orbiting monitors, things were getting out of hand. He's now the most visited cadet on the moon. He's single-handedly reduced trauma-related injuries by 30%. He created a service economy, in a jungle, with no power grid. And the wildlife stays away, it's like they respect the zoning laws. Kolith thumped the table. This is not survival, this is theater. He's surviving better than anyone else, Jotev replied. He's thriving. By day 25, Marcus installed a feedback wall. Flat bark slabs painted with charcoal, where cadets could leave comments. The stew was excellent, but the hammock creaked too much. Zella. Best 30 credits I've spent. Also the only 30 credits I've spent. Dirk. Broken arm fixed. Didn't even scream much. 9/10. Erval. Marcus wrote at the top. Customer satisfaction is our survival metric. That same evening, heavy rains flooded the lower grove. One of the outlying shelters washed out, and a group of cadets stumbled into Camp Chillax, soaked and shivering. They were offered dry bedding, broth, and hot stones for warmth. No one asked for payment. Emergency services are pro bono, Marcus said. That night, under a dripping tarp and crackling fire, Marcus sat beside Alashi and rubbed his shoulder. His own wounds hadn't fully healed. 2 fingers still bore infection scars from thorn cuts. He'd lost 10 pounds. Sleep came in broken doses. You could have stayed solo, Alashi said quietly, kept it all for yourself. I didn't build this to be alone, he replied. I built it to make it. By day 29, Camp Chillax had served 32 cadets. 5 minor surgeries. 4 emergency splints. 12 successful wildlife deterrents. 2 marriages proposed, unclear if legal under interspecies law. And 1 complete economic ledger with debts noted in credits, fungal spores, and teeth. Marcus had even accepted a particularly shiny beetle as a high-value token and used it as collateral for hammock rental. The instructors gave up trying to predict anything. Kolith said, "We gave him nothing." Jotev nodded slowly. And he built capitalism. By the dawn of day 20, the jungle decided it had been too gentle. The sky cracked open with a thunderclap that rattled every bamboo post in Camp Chillax. Rain fell in sheets so thick it turned pathways into streams and streams into floods. The wind shredded leaf, thatched roofs, and knocked down half of Musk Alley. Marcus was soaked before he even got out of his hammock. "Strahl," he shouted over the wind. "Evacuate sleeping quarters. Get everyone under the stone overhang." Strahl, already waist-deep in moving Alashi's spice baskets, gave a low chirp of acknowledgement and charged off into the downpour. Marcus and Tolek, who'd instinctively started moving supplies without a word, dragged as many containers as they could into the kitchen lean-to. It was barely holding together. Ropes slipped, panels bent. The fire pit drowned. Within minutes, the careful order Marcus had built over the last 3 weeks started to unravel. Over 24 cadets huddled under the rocky ledge near the eastern edge of camp, their eyes wide and alien with fear. Water surged around their feet. A branch flew past like a javelin. Lightning struck a tree 200 yards away, lighting up the entire grove in blue-white brilliance. Someone whimpered. Marcus stood soaked and shivering, staring out into the maelstrom, brain calculating loss versus salvage. The solar stills were gone. The signboard had washed away. The hammock quadrant had collapsed in a tangle of vines and wet canvas. His first aid supplies were damp, possibly ruined. His hands clenched, useless for a moment. Alashi touched his shoulder. "You cannot fix the rain. I can fix the camp. You can start with the ones who are hurt." 2 cadets had twisted ankles from slipping during the dash to shelter. 1 had a deep cut on the thigh from a flying shard of bamboo. Marcus boiled water using his backup kit and a sealed fire starter brick he'd saved for emergencies. He sanitized what he could, rewrapped what needed dressing, and carefully used his last roll of clean bandages. The rest, he made do with boiled cloth strips and leaf compresses. The wound on the thigh was too wide to stitch with what he had. He cleaned it thoroughly and explained it would scar. The cadet nodded silently. Strahl and Talik patched what was left of the cooking shelter. Alashi reboiled every food store that had gotten wet and started drying them on flat stones under the ledge's overhang, using heat from the only remaining fire. By nightfall, the rain had slowed to a miserable drizzle. The camp was half gone, but the people weren't. Marcus stood next to the mud-spattered ledger he'd recovered, water warped and half illegible. "All right," he said aloud. "Tomorrow, we rebuild." Day 21 dawned with low clouds and silence. The predators had vanished again, possibly due to scent lines reinforced with fresh secretions Marcus collected that morning. He no longer needed to explain how. Everyone who didn't want to know simply didn't ask. With his inventory depleted, Marcus made his first official announcement. All debts are frozen until further notice. New charges will resume once basic services are restored. Voluntary labor accepted in lieu of payment. Meals are down to 1 per day until we restore food prep. Latrines are being redesigned. Apologies for the temporary inconvenience. Grint clapped. Strahl nodded solemnly. The Darishi warrior grunted, spoken like a true chieftain. Over the next 3 days, the camp rose again. Shelter was restructured with flood drainage ditches and improved leaf roofing. Marcus introduced a new design for hammocks, slightly elevated on tensioned bamboo frames to avoid ground moisture. The rebuilt kitchen included a fire-resistant clay stove molded from sediment straw found near a riverbed. 2 cadets from a floating habitat species helped Marcus design a passive water catchment system using banana-sized leaves and resin drip gutters. It worked better than anything he'd built before. In return, they asked to be taught how to cook. Alashi obliged. She insisted everyone wash their hands first. On day 24, Marcus fell. Not metaphorically, he slipped while re-rigging a pulley system and landed shoulder first on a stone basin. The crack was audible, followed by a barked curse. Talik and Alashi helped him sit down. He clutched his upper arm, jaw clenched, breath shallow. "Can you move your fingers?" Strahl asked. "Yes." "Bend the elbow?" "Mostly. Hurts like hell." Strahl examined the swelling, likely not broken, a contusion or rotator cuff strain, should immobilize. Marcus nodded. "I'll wrap it, keep it elevated." He spent the rest of the day one-armed, giving instructions while seated under the central shelter with a sling made from a visitor's donated scarf. Every now and then, he winced but kept talking. It would take 10 days before he could raise that arm above shoulder height again. He adapted. Again. Day 25 saw the return of the exam drone. It hovered low this time, speakers blaring. "Your camp is under renewed scrutiny. Unauthorized structures must be dismantled. Unauthorized transactions must cease. The final retrieval is imminent." Marcus glanced at the drone. Then, he looked around. He saw cadets repairing walls, boiling leaves, taking turns ladling stew into carved cups. He saw hammocks swaying gently. He saw a new group learning how to make fire with resin knots and dry twigs. He looked up again. "This is survival." The drone did not reply. He added, "You dropped us here to see who'd live, not who'd suffer." Still nothing. So Marcus nodded and walked away. On day 26, someone tried to open a rival camp. A young cadet named Jerix, from a species resembling armored lemurs, cleared a patch of land and put up a banner that read, "Camp Gritfire, for real survivors only." He charged no credits, but demanded that guests bring their own food and sleep in the dirt to prove true resilience. His camp lasted less than 2 days before a growlet beast sniffed its way into the open food stores and sent 5 cadets sprinting back to chillax. Jerix returned too, covered in mud and minus his tarp. Marcus didn't say anything, just passed him a bowl of soup. By day 27, Camp Chillax had gained an odd reputation. To some, it was a failure of discipline, to others, a triumph of adaptability. No one had died. No one had signaled for emergency retrieval in over a week. Cadets had started taking notes, sharing survival techniques, sketching structures. There were debates about economics, value, and trade ethics. Someone set up a barter stand. Someone else made a song about hammocks. One cadet painted a mural on the central shelter, a rough image of Marcus holding a cooking spoon like a sword, surrounded by hammocks, fire, and the words, "We didn't die." He laughed so hard, he had to sit down again. On the evening of day 29, Marcus gathered everyone around the fire. His arm still ached. His left foot had a bruise the size of an orange. He hadn't tasted a real meal in a month. But when he looked around the camp, he didn't feel tired. He felt ready. "Tomorrow," he said, "we go home." A murmur passed through the cadets. "To be clear," he added, "this isn't a graduation speech. I'm just letting you know I'm eating first when we get back to the station." Laughter. Even the Darashi grinned. Then Elashi raised a cup. "To Camp Chillax." Dozens of cups followed. "To not dying." "To hammocks." "To capitalism." Marcus winced. "Let's not start that again." Above the moon, the monitors went silent. The instructors reviewed logs, rewatched footage, reread the ledger Marcus had submitted via drone, upload carefully annotated in multiple currencies and species codes. Kolith was still furious. This wasn't survival. It was... Joe Tev cut him off. It was survival. He took chaos and made cooperation, took scarcity and built structure, took pain and reduced it. And no one asked him to. He charged for hammocks. And fixed a broken arm. As the retrieval ships descended at dawn, Marcus watched the jungle one last time. Something distant growled, then faded. Camp Chillax was still standing. The retrieval pods landed just after sunrise, slicing through the mist like silver daggers. Their support struts hissed steam into the soil, and hatch doors swung wide with mechanical precision, revealing uniformed exam techs and stretchers just in case. No one needed the stretchers. Instead, 29 cadets emerged from Camp Chillax in orderly groups, with packed gear, clean wounds, and calm expressions. The techs expected limping, confusion, panic. What they saw instead was a loosely formed caravan, trading jokes and helping each other down the slope. At the rear of the group, Marcus limped with one arm still in a sling. His boots were patched with vines. He carried his notebook like it was scripture. "Cadet Marcus T. Adair?" one of the lead instructors asked, eyes scanning a biometric tablet. Marcus nodded. "Present. And mostly intact." The instructor gave him a hard look. "We need to debrief you. Immediately." Marcus sighed. "Let me say goodbye to my spa, at least." The camp wasn't dismantled. Not yet. Protocol dictated all constructed shelters be taken down before final retrieval, something about preserving the untouched status of the moon. But when the cleanup drones hovered over Camp Chillax, they paused. The layout was structured. Designated sanitation areas, clean water runoff systems, no rotting food, no stray debris. One drone emitted a soft beep. The others hovered uncertainly. Eventually, someone overrode them from orbit and instructed, "Leave it. This one's going in the record." In the debriefing room aboard the orbiting evaluation station, Marcus sat alone in a chilled chamber under bright lighting. Across from him sat 4 examiners, 3 alien, 1 human. They did not smile. "Explain the ledger," Examiner Kolith began, antennae twitching. Marcus slid it across the table. Detailed list of every exchange, favor, medical procedure, and guided tour. Also includes hammock scheduling, daily meal counts, and a currency key. "A currency key?" the human examiner asked. Marcus nodded. "We had 3 forms of exchange. Some cadets used spores, others used teeth from local fauna. I assigned relative values based on supply and demand principles. Teeth, for instance, were excellent for betting and bartering because they were small, abundant, and universally unpleasant to collect." "You monetize discomfort?" Kolith barked. "I quantified risk," Marcus replied calmly. "It encouraged efficient behavior." Joe Tev leaned forward. "You treated wounds, multiple wounds, including a complex forearm fracture." "Yes. I sterilized all instruments, stabilized the bone, and advised limited movement. I also made a splint, using split bamboo and reinforced cloth." "Did you have medical training?" "Standard survival first aid, with a few hours of battlefield medicine electives." Marcus hesitated. "And some YouTube videos from before I enlisted." The human examiner chuckled. Kolith did not. "You defied exam parameters. You created a hub of social commerce and mutual aid. This was meant to test your ability to survive independently. Marcus shifted in his seat. I did survive independently. I used what I had: shelter, trade, teamwork. I didn't just wait out the clock. I made the clock run smoother for everyone else. Silence fell. Finally, the human leaned back. No fatalities. 24 injuries stabilized. 0 panic beacons activated in the final week. Predatory fauna avoided the area entirely. You even lowered infection rates. Marcus shrugged with one good shoulder. Turns out clean water and hammocks are a decent morale booster. Meanwhile, in a separate chamber, the other cadets were being interviewed. Strahl simply said, I would have failed without that camp. I came for survival. I learned cooperation. Elashi added. We built a kitchen. We shared food. We created something that kept us safe. Erval, still wearing his splint, stated, he didn't ask to be followed. We followed him because he helped us. Grint drew a diagram. It was completely incomprehensible, but accompanied by enthusiastic warbling that a translator rendered as, I slept so well, I forgot to molt. Even the Darishi, when asked if he felt dishonored by paying for services, grunted. He gave freely when it mattered. That is a warrior's code. Later that day, in the command chamber above the moon, the examiners convened privately. Kolith was furious. We gave him nothing, no instructions, no leniency, and he turned it into a lounge. The human liaison tilted her head. He also turned it into a trauma care center. That wasn't the assignment. Chotev splayed his fingers. But it was the outcome. Kolith's antennae twitched so hard they knocked a stylus off the table. Fine. Give him a passing grade, but let the record show he undermined the exam. The liaison smiled. I'll write that down, right next to reduced cadet injury rate by 73%. Marcus didn't hear about the final deliberation until much later. He was in the medbay, arm properly scanned and confirmed as a grade 2 shoulder strain. 8 weeks of reduced activity. Ice and rest. A real bed. You're lucky, the medic said. No permanent damage, but you're going to need therapy. Marcus blinked. Physical therapy? No, actual therapy. You built a jungle resort during a survival exam. That raises questions. He grinned. Tell me something I don't know. 3 weeks later, Marcus was invited back to the station to attend a ceremony. He almost didn't go. He still limped, and his shoulder ached when he tried to stretch. But curiosity won out. The ceremony was held in a shared hall, rare for a multi-species event. Hundreds of cadets, instructors, and station staff were present. Kolith gave a short, terse speech about the importance of respecting exam boundaries. Jotev followed with a list of positive anomalies that had occurred, including 0 fatalities, minimal wildlife conflict, and the emergence of unexpected economic structures. Then, the human liaison called Marcus forward. He walked slowly to the stage. Cadet Marcus Adair, she said, in recognition of your unusual approach to the wilderness final exam and your contributions to cadet safety, morale, and adaptive logistics. She paused, then smiled. We award you a commendation for adaptive excellence and provisional survival instruction certification. The crowd applauded. Strahl clacked loudly. Elashi gave a two-handed cheer. Grint threw polished stones into the air like confetti. Marcus stood blinking at the certificate. Survival instruction? He whispered. You're teaching the next class, the liaison added. Pending site clearance, of course. Back in his quarters, Marcus sat on his bunk, flipping through a new ledger. He'd already drafted lesson plans: fire starting, shelter building, basic trade theory, and emergency hammock management. At the back of the ledger was a crude sketch of Camp Chillax, a few pine trees, a ring of fire, a series of